Hey everyone, Mulligan here, and welcome to part 5 of the spoiler preview for the upcoming set, The Fall of Argenport. In this video, I'll talk about the cards from the upcoming expansion that have been spoiled in the last week or so. As with previous videos, I'll only be talking about the cards as far as their use and constructed, unless the card is absolutely terrible in that format, in which case I'll briefly talk about its potential use in the limited formats, which are draft and sealed. So first up is Sandstorm Scarf. This is a 1-power relic requiring 1 time influence to play. And units can't fly while this is in play. Things were pretty hilarious on Discord when this was first revealed. A bunch of people thought this wasn't a real card. Yes, it is indeed real. For those not in the know, there was an earlier patch last year where if you played Sandstorm Titan, the purple scarf it wears would be swirling around it while the card is in play. The scarf didn't stick around for very long though, and was removed in a later patch. So there's kind of a meme in the community where the scarf on Sandstorm Titan is actually the thing that prevents units from flying, not the Titan itself. Direwolf is fully embracing the meme with this card. So, how good is this card? Well, it's not something that'll be run in any main deck. Even decks focused on relics like the Praxis, Explorer, Sentinel tribal decks probably wouldn't run this card in their main deck. But as far as market or possibly sideboard material, this has some potential. I expect a few decks to be trying this in their markets. If Infinite Hourglass is seeing sideboard play in tournaments, so can this. Next we have Crunch the Hoarder. This is a 3-power 3/3 unit requiring 1 fire and 1 primal influence to play. He has Overwhelm and Infiltrate, where you draw 2 cards, then discard a card. If you discarded a spell or attachment, Crunch gets Berserk. Yeti tribal decks are getting a solid 3-drop here. There is Pok Pok, and you can play him for free if you have even a partially activated Champion of Fury. But a free Pok Pok usually doesn't impact the game much, so this is still the better 3-drop in my opinion. The Overwhelm is pretty big on this card, since if you're playing this in a Yeti deck, you're going to be running Wump, which buffs this to a 4/4. Making it even easier to get damage through to activate Infiltrate. Speaking of the Infiltrate ability, it has synergy with Kenna, since you can get a spell back if that's what you discarded to Crunch. It also has synergy with the janky Westwind Herald. I could even see non-Yeti Skycrag decks potentially running this card. I'd try this in Skycrag midrange, not knowing the rest of the set. There's definitely a chance that Crunch won't see play in Constructed, but that doesn't make it a bad card. It'll just depend on whether Yetis or just Skycrag midrange in general will be good or not. And next we have Jawbone Greatsword. This is a 4-power 5/2 relic weapon requiring 2 fire influence to play. It has Tribute, where you create and draw an 8/6 Brand without fear. And Brand is a 7-drop, also requiring 2 fire influence to play. He has Berserk, and a summon ability where you may sacrifice another unit to give Brand Overwhelm. So this is an interesting relic weapon. Some have compared this to Orc Runehammer, which is a bad comparison the more I think about it. First off, this kills stuff like Impending Doom, Crown Watch Trader, and perhaps most importantly, Shelterwing Rider. It also kills Champion of Cunning, by the way. Runehammer can't do that without some type of attack buff. That's beside the point though. The only time you'd compare the two is if you're looking to play an armory type of deck or some other Rakano deck. This is far more likely to see play in Stone Scar and Skycrag decks because of the tribute ability. The weapon is asking to be played in a deck with a decent amount of units. Skycrag and Stone Scar fit the bill. Stone Scar in particular has the best synergy with this card, since it's the faction best equipped to sacrifice a unit to Brand. And you really want to give him Overwhelm if you can. Maybe you could play this in Armory and sacrifice Rakano Artisans to Brand, and I think this still gives Auric Runehammer some competition in that deck. But you're far less likely to even trigger Tribute, never mind Brand's Summon. You just don't run enough units in Armory to really use this to its full potential there. Up next is End of the Line. This is a 6-power spell requiring 2 Shadow Influence to play. It has Lifesteal and Warp, and you deal 3 damage to 2 enemies. If Tribute is activated, you deal 4 damage to 2 enemies instead. So, a souped up Spirit Drain. Spirit Drain is unplayable in Constructed, and pretty bad even in limited formats where getting removal is like finding gold. Is this good enough to actually see play in Constructed? I doubt it. Even though you're hitting 2 enemies now, and this has Warp, 3 damage just isn't a lot in the late game. Even 4 damage doesn't do anything versus bigger mid-range decks. The idea is to go into combat with your units and then play this at the end of your turn to finish some targets off, but that basically forces you to play your turn in a certain order. And that's just something I have an issue with. Not just with this card, but the Tribute mechanic in general. This might see a bit more play in Limited just because units are smaller there, and Draft and Sealed are far more focused on unit combat than Constructed, but that's as far as this card will go, in my opinion. So this past week we got another article from Direwolf showing off the rest of the standard power cards. If you're seeing these for the first time, the standard power cards work just like the monuments from the Empty Throne set. When you reach 5 power, any standard power cards in your hand or deck transform into another card called a tactic. Instead of getting units though, the tactic cards are fast spells. Direwolf did confirm that these tactic cards are stronger versions of other fast spells that already exist in the game. We've already reviewed Clan Standard in the second preview video in this series, where we saw that Clan Tactic was a stronger version of Lightning Strike. So let's take a look at what the rest of these cards do. And let's start off with Shogo Standard. This is a depleted power. You gain 1 fire influence, and when you reach 5 power, this transforms into a Shogo Tactic. The Shogo Tactic is a 2 power fast spell requiring 1 fire influence to play, and you give a unit +4/+2 and overwhelm this turn. So the tactic card on this is a souped up version of Rampage. This seems a bit more appealing than Granite Monument, which gives you a 4/1 Hound with charge. The problem with the Hound has always been its 1 health and lack of evasion. You feel pretty bad having a 4/1 charger you can't play because there's a Temple Scribe or some random Grenadin token standing in the way. This at least makes it so you can pump the already good unit you run in your deck. Very few decks ran Granite Monument, but I expect to see this card more often than the Monument in fire-based aggro decks. Next is Temple Standard. This is also depleted. You gain 1 time influence, and this transforms into a Temple Tactic at 5 power. Temple Tactic is a 2 power fast spell requiring 1 time influence to play. You put a unit and each weapon it's wielding into its owner's hand. So this is the oddball of the group. I'm still asking myself why when it comes to this card. This is supposed to be a better version of Teleport. The problem is this puts any weapons attached to the unit back in their hand along with the unit itself. When you use Teleport, any attachments the unit had actually go to the void. The only reason to play this is if you would like this specific effect in your deck, but you don't want to waste actual deck slots for Teleport. Which I could see, because Teleport hasn't seen serious play in Constructed since the Empty Throne meta. You wouldn't run this over Amber Monument though, since it's the best monument in the game, and running both doesn't seem ideal since time decks tend to be mid-range and you want to get to 6 power at least. Running too many transmute power cards could mess you up in that regard. I think this will see the least amount of play out of all the standard cards, but we'll see. Next is Crown Watch Standard. Depleted power where you gain 1 justice influence, and at 5 power this transforms into a Crown Watch Tactic, which is also a 2 power fast spell requiring 1 justice influence to play, and you give a unit +3/+3 and lifesteal this turn. So we get a Finest Hour that costs 1 more but also gives the unit lifesteal. It seems fine. These are cards that are generated after all. The power cards are the ones taking up the deck slots, not the tactic cards. You're putting these in your more aggressive decks to mitigate flooding somewhat. I don't have much else to say about this. The lifesteal on this just gives Justice even more anti-aggro than it already has. This probably sees more play than Emerald Monument, not because the Monument is necessarily bad, but paying 5 power for a 3/3 weapon doesn't always feel great. You pretty much only play it when you have nothing better to do, which is the whole point of Emerald Monument. But at least with this, there will be more situations you can fit Crown Watch Tactic into. And the last standard card is Cabal Standard. Also depleted power, you gain 1 Shadow Influence, and this transforms into a Cabal Tactic at 5 power. Cabal Tactic is a 2 power fast spell, requiring 1 Shadow Influence to play, and you give 2 of your units +2 strength and quick draw this turn. Personally, this is my favorite standard of them all. You can't really compare this to Rapid Shot. It's more like a combination of that and Trigger Happy. Granite and Amethyst Monument never saw any real success in Stone Scar aggro decks. Once in a while Granite was pretty good, but it's never been a staple. I think this has a better chance of sticking around in Stone Scar decks. As good as Bandit Queen is, sometimes you wish the one unit you buffed had 1 more strength point to make the quick draw actually matter. I don't know if this will stick in Stone Scar, but it seems like a pretty good option to mitigate flooding, which is something aggro decks are always looking for. Alright, we're done with the standard cards, but we've got 2 more cards to take a look at. The first being Time Flies. This is a 1 power 0/2 unit requiring 1 time influence to play. It has flying, and each player has +2 maximum power. So the name is great on this card. Very, very clever. This might be better than the Sandstorm Scarf meme. It's close. Outside of that, not much to say about this one. It really sucks that it's a legendary because it's a pretty bad one. But every set will have a bad one, I suppose. Or several. If this sees play at all, it'll only be in Cockroach decks, thanks to the unit tag. The idea behind this is to ramp up to your power plays in that deck, those being Cockroach itself and Crown of Possibilities. When combined with stuff like Second Sight, the engine the 2 cards provide is supposed to make up for the drawback this card has of giving your opponent more power. Because once the engine gets going, it's hard to stop. I don't think it'll pan out at all, and I'll be as shocked as anybody if this card even makes Cockroaches a tier 2 deck. And last but not least, we have Resurface, a 4 power spell requiring 2 primal influence to play. It has Warp, and you move a spell of your choice to the top of your deck. So I might be in the minority, but I think this card is not only pretty good, but actually fairly costed. A lot of people have been comparing this to Celestial Omen, which is understandable because they're both primal cards with similar effects. However, I think an arguably better comparison is Rise to the Challenge. Looking at both Rise and this card just tells me that Rise probably sets the bar at what a tutor should cost, if it only searches for something specific. Anyway, this should give certain combo decks some help, but not every combo deck is going to benefit. You can't search for a relic like Crown of Possibilities or even Crystalline Chalice. It is actually cool to see Primal getting something like this. Maybe this is what Solitude needs to actually be a consistent win condition. Then again, I've played with Solitude a lot, and the big issue in playing it with Primal is that by the time you get a good Solitude off, Channel the Tempest is basically just as good. But this has some potential in Constructed. Thanks for listening to my thoughts on the most recent spoilers from the upcoming set that we got in the past week or so. If you liked the video, feel free to hit the like button. Let me know in the comments if you have any feedback for the content and what brews you're thinking about trying when the new set finally drops. I've got other Eternal content on the channel as well, so feel free to look around, and if you like what you see, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for taking time out of your day to watch this. I'll see you all soon. Take care.